Well, hello, Internet. Welcome to the fabulous 147th episode extravaganza of the Comic Watchers Show. I'm your host, Matt Meyer. With me, as always, is my loyal sidekick, Mighty Mike Eakins. Mike, how the heck are you, buddy?
I'm good. How you doing, man?
You know, you're so much more than a sidekick. You're like a co-host, actually, and a brother, and a Navy veteran. And I just want to say, on this Veterans Day Eve, thank you so much for your. I think it was 20 years you put your full 20 in. Is that right? So yeah, dude, thank you so much for serving your country like that. I appreciate it very much, Lee. Our guest this week is author Jeffrey Brown. He is coming to us to talk about Batman and Robin and Howard, a new joint venture from DC and Penguin Random House. Jeffrey, how the heck are you?
Great.
Thank you so much for coming. I have to say, this book is really fun, and I mean, I'm not the target audience, and I still am like, I want more. So for those who may not be familiar with your work on Jedi Academy or Vader and Son, what can people expect from Batman and Robin and Howard? Let's just jump right in, man.
Yeah. So my story is about the version of, as you know, there's many different versions of Batman and Robin, so in my story we have, sorry, there's an echo there, but so in my story, it's Damian Wayne is Robin, and so he's Bruce Wayne's son, and he gets a little overexcited on crime fighting patrol, and so kind of gets grounded and sent to a new school where he meets this other kid, Howard. And of course, Howard is at that school is kind of like, he's like the great student, and he's popular, and he's really good on the soccer team, and he thinks he's going to show Damian the ropes. But of course, Damian is, like this secret superhero, and he thinks Howard is just this cocky kid who needs to like be learn a little humility. So they both start out thinking that the other one is their kind of their rival, and they end up, without spoiling too much, they have to learn to work together.
Such is the essence of the superheroes, because when they first meet, they have to have a misunderstanding fight.
Yes.
And then they team up. So why wouldn't Robin and his school chum be any different? Mm-hmm. This story is just chock full of whimsy and humor, and I mean, you obviously too have a really deep affection for the characters Batman and Robin and their whole little world. What's your background like with Batman?
Yeah, so I mean, growing up, I was mostly a Marvel reader. So XMen was my favorite, but I read all the Marvel comics, and I didn't really like DC, except for Batman. I always loved Batman, and then as I got older and started discovering different writers and artists, and got really into Grant Morrison, and so then I started reading a lot more DC. And so when DC started making this push for more like books for younger readers, and they said, like, do you have anything you'd like to pitch to us? And I was like, oh, I would love to do something with Batman, so that was immediately, it's like, okay, I got to figure out a Batman story.
That's awesome. How did let me just ask the dumbest question in the room, but I mean, how did you come to this particular story?
Yeah,
because it's again, it's just fun, but it feels lived in. Like, maybe you have a kid that played soccer, or maybe you played soccer, or maybe you hate your best friend.
Yeah, I mean, if you've read the Star Wars books, so like Darth Vader and Son was obviously based kind of on me and my son when he was 4 years old, and so putting Darth Vader in my shoes. So drawing a lot in my own personal experiences. Jedi Academy was basically my years in middle school. And so I always like try to draw on real life as much as possible. And so I definitely did that in this story in different ways. The initial genesis of the story was actually an idea I had for like, like I always really like watching teen movies, like I Can't Hardly Wait, or 10 Things I Hate About You, like the old teen high school movies. And I had this idea for a movie like that, where it was basically like the story of two high school rivals, where the hotshot kid at the school thinks he's going to show the new kid around, and then the new kid just is better than him at everything, and how this hotshot kid deals with realizing that he's the second best now. But I had it like, so it was a story that was kind of in the back of my mind. And so when I had this opportunity to do something with DC, and I was like, I knew I wanted to do something with Batman, but I didn't have a particular idea. And immediately I was like, oh, but if I make the story about Robin, and Robin is Damian Wayne, and it just all kind of clicked. So like immediately Robin became one of the two rivals, and so a lot of the relationship between Damian and Bruce Wayne is kind of drawn from my life now. So my older son, who was 4 when I wrote Darth Vader and Son, is now turning 15, and so he's at that age where I am no longer the cool dad. Like nothing
4
I do.
is a way better age.
Yeah.
Like they can do less, but I want to just like slam the door in their face a lot less at 4. Mike, let's get you in on the conversation, buddy. Go for it.
No, Jeff, with Damian and Howard coming from different backgrounds, and you seamlessly merged them, as the story unfolds, and we kind of see that they are pretty much the same character. Like, how delicate was it with you would just, instead of just going, well, it's just the rich kid comes to new school and we learn things, but because the book overall, it can be aimed at kids, but this is really, to me, it touches for adults and kids alike, because there's so much good characters and good empathy within the characters. How did that kind of come about for you?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of came through the process of writing. So I know, like, we're used to seeing Robin as, kind of maybe more serious. Like he's already the superhero, and you never really see Robin as a kid, or even when he's a kid, like it's still like he's the superhero who happens to be a kid, not a kid that happens to be a superhero. And so I really wanted to get back to that core. And with Howard, as I worked on the story, I realized, like, well, Howard as a character, like if he's going to be a nice guy,
right,
even if he kind of gets threatened by Damian coming in, and he's like kind of unsure about where his place is going to be, in the hierarchy of school cliques or something. Ultimately his character is like, he's a good guy and he likes to help people and he wants to understand, and he is very empathetic. And so it's really like his character kind of helped guide the story that way. And by having his character, it took Damian down a different path than you might see in the comics normally, where it's like, now he's got this positive influence that he can open up to, someone he can talk to who's his age, so he understands some of the things, like about school and things, and like dealing with parents, and like and then and then for Howard, it's like, he kind of gets to see Damian has his own issues, like whatever he looks like from the outside, you know, once Damian starts opening up, Howard realizes, you know, like he has his own issues that he's dealing with, and so they kind of help each other through things.
Yeah, that's great, because one of the things that kind of struck me as kind of another great thing that I hope people take away from the story is the fact that you wrote Damian in a way that we haven't seen. Like you made him human, and you didn't make him, pardon my French, you didn't make him an ass. You know? And
yeah.
I mean, how did that come about? Was that fun to kind of take Damian down that different direction that we really haven't seen?
Yeah, I mean, I knew I wanted to do something different with the characters. Like, so with Batman, it was, you know, he's normally like seen as like so ultra cool, but through Damian's eyes, he's just awkward goofball dad, right?
Yeah.
Like
We're definitely gonna get to some stuff with Batman.
Oh,
yeah, everything he does is embarrassing. So, and I knew I wanted to like find something different with Damian, but you know, like when I first started writing the story, he was pretty much, you know, the Damian that we're used to seeing, whether it's like Teen Titans Go or in the comics, and but yeah, like as I wrote the story, like it just made more, it was more interesting to have like, let's peel back the layers and, you know, think about like when you're a kid, what are those emotions? Like, what is it like when you're a kid making friends and figuring out who your friends should be?
Sure.
And so really it was just, you know, kind of, it all ended up working out well, where the more I worked on the story, the more Damon's character kind of developed, and that helped the story develop.
Well, I mean, this is very much a different look at Damian, but he still has that same sort of bratty quality that we're accustomed to seeing from quote unquote regular Damian. But you know, he feels by the same turn, he feels more like a real kid, a kid that comes from a life of privilege and now has to assimilate in with just plain folks, right? That I really like that, and I think that in a slightly different world, we could have gotten more of that in comics. I know at one point in time, Peter Tomasi and Patrick Gleason, when they were on the Batman and Robin comic, they specifically had Damian have to go to a private school and have to learn how to assimilate and be a normal kid. And it was great. There was such good mileage. I mean, is there any more modern stuff like that helped inform and influence your take on Damian Wayne?
I mean, really, I mean, it just, I don't know if I could think of anything specific, but you know, just in general, like I feel like we're blessed with a time where the variety of comics is so much greater than it was when I was a kid. Not that I'm didn't have enough to read or something, but like it's like now there's so much.
There's an embarrassment of riches,
like
right?
It's now. Like I can't even read it all. But you know, it's like I also feel like influences come from unexpected places. So like one of the influences I've mentioned to people before about this book is actually, you know, Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns, where seeing like this older Batman who is, you know, his body's kind of breaking down and he's vulnerable in a different way than you're used to seeing. And it's not like vulnerable where one issue Superman, you know, has to deal with kryptonite and so he's weaker than usual. It's like over the 4 issues of the comic, you know, Batman gets kind of worn down.
Sure.
And so like there's something more realistic about that, about, you know, like, yeah, he can't do that forever. And so like there's little things like that I feel like kind of informed my comic, like in letting it be like, okay, so, you know, like, can Batman make a mistake that's like something simpler and more stupid than, you know, than you might see in the comics, where everything is like super high stakes.
Yeah.
Like getting locked in the equipment room.
Exactly. Yeah.
Love that. God,
that outside of the interplay between Damian and Howard, that's absolutely the best part of the book.
Yeah.
Mike, you were just telling me earlier about your future con art requests.
Yeah.
Involving Batman crouching on a vending machine.
Yep. I need that on a shirt, a headband, tattooed on my lower calf. That is a thing that has to happen. That's just that whole part is just, it's brilliant. It really, really is.
Well, and it humanizes Batman in a funny, relatable way. You know, I mean, brilliant.
Yeah, that was. I mean, it was something that wasn't another thing that was kind of unexpected. But as the story as I worked out how the story would go, it just made sense. Like, I would have liked to draw more Batman Robin like actual action, but it just, like, the way the story was going, it just made sense to, like, I need Batman I want to have Batman in the story, but I need him out of the way,
right?
Like, so that he doesn't, kind of interfere as much. And then also it just became really interesting is because, like, it really gave me a chance to play with, like, kind of what Batman is thinking. And so I feel like I was able to show a little more about Damian's character through, seeing who Batman is.
Yeah.
Well, and this is very much Bat Dad that we're talking about here, not the again, if you were mistaken up to this point that we're dealing with a more modern comics molded iteration of Batman, you're sorely mistaken. And Bat Dad, as I'm going to affectionately call him, is, well, one, he's a way better dad than quote unquote actual Batman. much better. But I just like, did you take anything? You mentioned that in past books, you utilized your relationship with your son as a basis for the work itself. Did you look back at yourself? I mean, is Bat Dad you to an extent?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's always, I'd like to think that I'm self-aware, but I'm probably only self-aware to know that I'm not terribly self-aware, if that makes sense. So it's like almost like I can think about these things with Batman, and then when someone points out, like, oh, that, like, you're kind of like that, then it's like, oh yeah, I do kind of the same things where, it's like, I think, for example, like Batman, like, trying to be like the stern disciplinarian, and like it's kind of awkward how he handles it in a way. It's like there's probably like there's probably like a book that would tell you like a better way to handle it all. But it's nice to see, like, well, yeah, we're like, as a dad, you're just kind of learning as you go also. So, like, why would Batman be any different? Like, it's like sometimes he gets it kind of right, and sometimes he's like, he could be a little more aware of what his son's going through. And so I think I feel like that's something, like, it's hard because I feel like I'm usually aware of it in retrospect, unfortunately, but as long as I keep trying to work toward it, I guess.
Absolutely. So I'm curious a little bit about, like, the mechanics of crafting something like Batman and Robin or Howard. I mean, really, or Vader and Son or Jedi Academy. When you're tapped to create a work like this, are you given a page count that you have to abide by, or do they basically give you free reign and say, well, hey, don't write War and Peace, but do your thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's so, like, the Vader books, it was was 64 pages, and we knew that from the start. And those, it's a little easier because they're like 1-page gags, and so it's basically the process is I just come up with like 150 or so ideas, and then we pick out, you know, the ones that we want to be in the book, and then I pencil them, and then get the approvals from Lucasfilm, and then ink and color and finish the art. And so it's a little bit simpler process. Like with this book, the I don't know if goal is the right word, but it was like like the recommendation or whatever, however you want to put it, was 128 pages of story, about thereabouts. And so, you know, and there's wiggle room where, you know, if I'm a little short on that or a little over, like it's okay. Like, I mean, I think like I could probably have made it go longer if I needed to. But yeah, so I had kind of a rough idea, like this is what I need to fit it into. And what I like about that is as much as it can feel restricting, it's good because it really makes you think about what you're including. And like if
you have to be more deliberate with it.
Yeah. So if something doesn't advance the story or develop the characters, if you might just not have room for it. And you, like, even if it's a really good joke, like, you got to be prepared to cut it out. You know, if it slows down the pacing of the story too much. And so, yeah, but I think I've done enough at this point where, you know, it's like my process is I start with kind of an outline, and the outline might be really basic, like, you know, Damian on patrol, Damian goes to new school, meets Howard, Howard and Damian become rivals, etc. And then I'll kind of develop that more and more until I get like a page by page breakdown of what the story would work out to. And so while I'm revising that page by page breakdown, I'm doing that kind of editing of like, oh, I had this idea for a cool scene, but there's just not enough room. Like, so like with the Batman scenes, I was, you know, it just became like, it made sense that most of those are 1 or 2 pages, and they're just kind of like interstitial to Damian and Howard's story. Then my first draft I do is like a fully drawn, like I draw it in like an actual like little sketchbook, but it's thumbnails, and so it's like stick figures, and then that's kind of my script, but it's, you know, it's semi-visual. And then I do a second rough draft that's much more finished and closer to the actual size that I'll draw the final artwork at. And then I do, you know, the final artwork after getting all the edits, and then there's corrections. So it's like each of those stages, there's a process of cutting things out. And like one of the things that happened in this book, like we rearranged the order of some of the pages slightly so that, and, you know, it's kind of moving around where some of the pages where you see Batman later in the book, and like, you know, just minor things, but like just makes the story that like move along that much more smoothly.
Right. Mike, go ahead, jump in, buddy.
Yeah, for sure. I noticed that in the book you gave Batman the classic, you know, 60s era, that classic oval shape, and then we kind of meshed, you know, Damian's outfit and stuff. Do you have a particular era of Batman that you're fond of, or was there a particular Batman that you kind of looked on for, say, like, you know, like inspiration on this type of Batman, or like directions and stuff like that, like jokes and how he's going to act and whatnot?
So visually, I really like the color scheme of the blue and the gray, and I don't know, there's just something about that design that fit with my character of Batman. Like, so to keep, like, you know, like he's not super angular, and the edges are softer and a little more lumpy, which I think, like, so that visually, like it all fits with like this idea of like the Bat Dad character.
Sure.
And with Robin too, you know, I didn't want to do like something super cool. I have I'll probably do it. I have a joke about why his costume looks how it does.
Yeah.
So I'll save that. But
yeah.
But you know, it made sense for him to have like this kind of like younger costume, because I think it's kind of symbolic of him. He's trying to grow up and mature, and he's just not quite there yet. So like his costume is kind of reflective. It's not like the super cool, you know, like modern slick Robin suit. Sure. It's, you know, it's like, it's a little more goofy and childlike still.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Cause I don't know if I could see like, you know, like Christian Bale's Batman sitting on top of a vending machine. Like, you know, I am the knight. No, you're drinking a Coke, buddy, but that's fine.
So how long generally did this process take for? I mean, you know, we're talking about a lot of pages, a lot of art, a lot of scripting. What's the? I mean, how long has this project been in the works?
Oh, I mean, it's been in the works a while, but I didn't get really going on it at first. It was a lot of thinking and letting it stew for a while. So there's like a slow cooking for the beginning part. So it may have been like a year or two as I like had other projects already scheduled and lined up, and so it was like kind of trying to time like finish this thing, and then okay, now I have time to work on this uninterrupted. And it worked out because I feel like the story really had more time to kind of sit in the back of my head. And you know, it's a way of writing, I guess, for me, where like I'm not typing things and then deleting and retyping, but like I'll just replay the whole story in my head and think about like, okay, this happens and this happens and this happens. And as I'm doing that, like, you know, it slowly evolves and changes, or something might click, like, actually that gives me an idea for this other part. And so it was nice to have that time. And then it was, you know, it's maybe like a year from first draft to final art. And
are you given like X number of months to complete the project or anything like that? I mean, I don't know how it works with this variety of publishing, but I know, you know, if Stephen King is given an advance on a novel, and you know he has till X date to turn it in. So I was just more curious if for you had any experiences like that.
Yeah, I mean sometimes from the start of the project, like there's like a hard date, like we need to have, like, you need to turn in your final artwork files by this date so that it can go to the printer this date, and then this and this. And so like this project was a little different, where it was kind of both of us kind of going back and forth, or is like where I wasn't ready to start yet, and then I'm ready to start, and they're like, well, if you like, now you're ahead of schedule because now we're thinking this is going to be the release date. And then so it's kind of like this back and forth. But the nice thing was they really were patient and, you know, gave the book the time that it needed. Maybe it didn't need the time, but it was nice that like it definitely made the experience better for me, because I didn't feel like kind of there was never a point where I was like, oh my gosh, now I'm like behind schedule and I really need to finish it.
Well, I don't think very many, if any, people do their best work when they're being rushed. Like some people, I thrive under stress. No, you don't. You're just working faster.
Yeah, I think there's a balance where, for me, where it's nice to kind of have a deadline, but but set in such a way that like I'm actually going to finish ahead of the deadline. So
right.
And so sometimes I've worked with editors where they're like, they tell me a date, but that's not the real date. The real date could be before or after that, but they know like my working method and it's like kind of like we both know that that's not the actual date that is going to be the date that I finish everything, but it's what we tell each other. And so yeah, I like having kind of an idea, but I like being able to adjust it if needed. I guess.
And I mean, I guess that means you must be working with some good editors if they're allowing you to the luxury of, hey, I need a little wiggle room here and there. So
yeah, I mean, I feel like I've been super fortunate. Like I've worked with a lot of good editors, so
that's good. That's very good. So I got to ask, I mean, you're clearly a talented storyteller. I mean, how did you find this particular niche of visual storytelling? Because I've really noticed that Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Dogman, this type of graphic storytelling is really popular right now, and it seems to be surging, and it's opening up gates for younger readers who, or not younger necessarily, but youngish readers that maybe didn't know that they might like a comic to journey forth and check out these things. What drew you to this particular milieu, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of happened naturally. So I started out my comics career writing autobiographical indie comics about adult relationships, not for kids. And then I was also doing like humorous parody stuff, also maybe not necessarily totally for adults, but like not necessarily for kids either, like for adults, but like kid friendly enough, I guess. And that led to the opportunity to do the Star Wars books starting with Darth Vader and Son, which I intended to write for people like me who were grew up with Star Wars, but now had kids of our own, and then kids just co-opted those books. And then while I was working on Darth Vader and Son, is when Scholastic approached Lucasfilm about wanting to do like a middle school Star Wars series. And so that's what became Jedi Academy. And at the time in my own life, I had kids, and my kids are growing up and getting, so by the time I was working in Jedi Academy, my son Oscar was, right in that sweet spot age where he's like 7, 8, and those books are like right for that age range. So it just kind of happened like naturally. Like I had kids and then somehow fell into writing books for kids. And yeah, I mean, I think I still think I write for myself as much as anything, which I don't know what that says about my maturity level.
Hey, I mean, but write what you would want to read, and if it's good, people are going to pick up on it.
Yeah, and I've
always believed that.
Yeah, and I just let the editors, like pull back. I mean, for the most part, I think I have a good sense of like what kids can and can't handle, and I think they can handle more than most people give them credit for. But I mean, like the one series I did of my own stories, Lucy and Andy Neanderthal, which is about two kids living in the Stone Age, and there's a lot of science and research behind those books. And that was the one series where my editor was like constantly coming back, like, I'm not sure kids will understand this. But yeah, so for the most part, I just write what I feel like, and then if the editor looks at it and thinks like this is reading like too old or too mature for kids, then I can adjust.
So do you feel like you have pretty good healthy relationship with your own inner child in that regard?
Maybe too healthy.
Not to drop too much psychology on you, mind you, but it doesn't sound like you're somebody that's exactly running away from like horrifying childhood experiences or anything like that.
No. I mean, I think I like looking back, I mean, I had my own issues as
Sure.
any child does, but you know, like overall, like I feel like I probably had like a pretty good childhood. Like, you know,
Did you play soccer?
I didn't play soccer when I was a kid really, but I play soccer now.
Oh,
so,
nice.
Yeah, so I
indoor or outdoor, because it's two very different games.
Well, I'm outdoor, but I'm in Chicago, and the place I play, they put up like a dome, so it's, you know, on the AstroTurf fields.
Okay.
But I can, you know, so it's indoor for the winter months, but outdoor essentially. And
okay.
Yeah, you know, it's just, and I don't play leagues, it's just casual pickup because
that's very cool.
I also don't want to get hurt, and also I can't keep up with like the young kids that are playing in the leagues, especially here in Chicago. There's some really you run into some really talented players.
Oh, absolutely.
In the casual pickup games, and you're like, okay. But yeah. So I enjoy it, and that's that was one of the reasons why, like, even going back to like they play soccer in Jedi Academy, and then also it just, so growing up I played American football when I was a kid, never for a team, but like on the schoolyard at recess, like every day on the weekends. Loved it. And so at first for this book, my first sketches for Howard were him holding, you know, like an American football. But as you know, like then thinking about it, it's like, well, one, soccer is kind of a more international sport,
right?
And it seemed like something like Damian would be more into soccer. Like it seems to fit his skill set more appropriately. And so then from there, it's just like, yeah, well, yeah, obviously I can just have them play soccer.
And he didn't beat anybody up and get red carded in the process of the game. So that's always a plus, especially when
the kids play they play a pretty clean game.
They did. I was very proud of Damian for that, because I know how that kid is. And I also didn't see any flopping.
Yeah, there's very little flopping.
I mean, listen, you watch the Italian leagues, or the European leagues, and it's just like an art form unto itself.
I mean, I will say it does hurt getting it can really hurt getting kicked in the shins, but I, like, you know, one time when one of my kids was in, you know, like a little soccer camp, and you know, go and watch, and I saw, like, you know, this little 6-year-old, and you know, he kind of like bumped into another kid, and it wasn't even like his leg, but then he like fell on his back, and he's like holding his knee and like kind of rolling, and it was just like,
oh
it was just amazing. It's like you're 6 years old and you've got it down. Like it's pretty
flopping like a fish out of the bowl.
Oh. So what when it comes to what you're looking at for this type of project, or your next project, or anything like that, like, what do you look for in order to challenge yourself?
I just different things. I just try to do different things. So, you know, like this book was, I think the biggest challenges for me were, one, that I'm not as familiar with the DC universe as I would be for the Marvel universe.
Right.
And so like that's a little bit of a challenge, like figuring out and doing some reading. And then just, you know, like I am not a super rich kid living in a millionaire mansion,
right,
at my private school. So you know, things like that, like trying to write characters that I don't necessarily like share a background with. That's also a challenge.
Well, I think it's challenging for any writer to put themselves in the shoes of somebody that they can't identify with. Like, if I'm writing Doctor Doom, I've never lived his life, but I can at least, I can imagine what a vain, self-centered jerk could react like in a given situation, right? And of course, we have decades of backstory that we can look to for influence as well, but really learning to think about the poor little rich kid trope in a sympathetic way, right? Like Damian's pretty lonely. I mean, he has Alfred, but his mom and dad are always fighting, which is quite literal, and I loved that. And he doesn't have any friends at this new school, and he kind of struggles with learning how to be a regular kid. That takes a particular skill set. How much of your own kids did you maybe put into Damian or Howard or any of the kids on the schoolyard?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's maybe nothing necessarily specific, but just in general, just looking at my kids and thinking about my own experiences of how friendships work when you're a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like as an adult, I can, sit down and meet someone and be like, oh my gosh, we are totally simpatico. Like we have the same interests and we totally know like we should be friends. We should hang out. And when you're a kid, like it just never works like that. It seems like it's just like you meet someone and like you become best friends, and like later you're like, why was I best friends with that kid?
Right.
Like they didn't even like me. and then meanwhile, like you've shunned this other kid who are like, oh my gosh, like now this kid is my best friend forever. But I wasted a year, like being friends with this other kid who was like mean to this, so just thinking about like how those, like how friendships kind of can start awkwardly like that. And I think it's just kind of trying to like channel that into the book.
Well, when you're a kid, you're a lot less of an intuitive and or critical thinker when it comes to reading people and knowing like, I don't think I should hang out with that person. He's actually kind of a bully. This is my experience. But Mike, go ahead and jump in, buddy.
Yeah, you are a bully, by the way. No, I'm kidding. So
I know.
The characters,
my cross to bear.
With the characters, especially like Alfred, who we haven't really hit on, had his own kind of elevation and really dipping into something that we don't get to see from Alfred a whole lot. And you touched on, you grew up with Marvel. When writing this book and with the characters and with the slapstick and stuff like that, did you kind of let the characters talk to you about their growth, or did the characters kind of grow organically as the book and your notes and script and stuff took shape?
I mean, Damian and Robin definitely both grew organically. Like I think I had a general idea of what their arcs would be, but like it really was like writing the book, kind of they changed and became more complex like through each draft. With Alfred, I knew I wanted to show Alfred differently. I feel like the two main versions of Alfred that you see are like super formal Alfred, who is very like behind the scenes and very servant oriented. And then there's like the super kick butt Alfred, who like he's like very dry, and then all of a sudden he's doing roundhouse kicks to like the the burglars.
He's Jeremy Irons. Alfred go.
Yeah. And so I had my idea for Alfred was he could be a different person to Damian than he would be to Bruce.
Sure.
And so with Bruce, he's still a little more formal because their relationship like started that way. But then like for Damian, he's more like the friendly, cool grandpa. And he spoils Damian a little bit, but not too much. He's like he's firm, but he kind of lets Damian lets Damian spread his wings a little bit sometimes. So
definitely.
And so it's like kind of like I just kind of thought of Alfred as like this grandfather type.
Well, and he's definitely helping, and this is true both in your story and in quote unquote regular comics. He's helping to fill that emotional void for Damian that Bruce can't fill, because he's a very broken boy who grew up himself and doesn't know how to relate to people. Now, obviously, Bat Dad is a little cooler than that, but in the grand scheme of things, there's still some basics to that dynamic there. And I mean, really, I think if you're looking at it, and you touched, I think there's one page with Commissioner Gordon on it, if I remember correctly, but Batman has basically the strongest supporting cast in all of comics. Period.
Absolutely.
And it to the point that you can do a one pager with Commissioner Gordon and people just know, oh, okay, I know who he is. I know what his deal is, and I know how he relates to Batman. You can just throw that in there. Were you ever tempted at any point? And I mean, I know you were kind of you had the boundaries of the length of story that you had to work within, but I mean, was there ever a time when maybe some other characters from the world of Batman were going to have a presence in the story?
Yeah, I mean, I had to do, like, the Commissioner Gordon joke was kind of one of one of the things that was kind of going to be in there from the beginning, and I knew I wanted to like get to draw the mustache for at least a couple pages. I mean, the biggest thing was like just thinking about who the villain in the book would be, and without spoiling anything, there's no super villain, like major character from the usual rogues gallery that Batman
one of my favorite aspects of the story, by the way.
And I what I realized was, like, because as I'm writing it in different versions, it's like, well, what if the villain is the Riddler, or what if is the villain the Joker, or someone working for the Joker? And every time I went down that path, the villains just kind of take over the story.
Right. Yeah.
They just become such a major part. It's almost like it's like the kind of the jokes in the Lego Batman movies where it's like the Joker is like Joker and Batman is like, you complete me, basically. It's like, that's like, as soon as the Joker shows up, that's kind of what the story becomes. It's Batman and the Joker. It's no longer a Batman story. It's a Batman and Joker story. And and it was just like, so the possibility of including any villain like that was kind of preempted by the fact that it would just take away too much from Damian and Howard's story, which like, as I worked on it, like, that was like the most interesting emotional part of the story.
Oh, absolutely. I think when we were growing up, we all had that kid that we initially butted heads with, and then it came to realize that it's because we're a lot in common, have more in common than we thought. And I mean, it's not exclusive to kids. I was actually butting heads with one of the people that works for me recently, and she's 16 or 17 years younger than me, and it finally hit me. Oh crap, she's exactly like I was at that age, and that's where we're butting heads. So I kind of, like, once I had that light bulb moment, I was able to reel it back in a little bit and figure out how to approach her in a more constructive way. But I mean, I think we all need, to a degree, in order to learn and to grow and to change, we all need a Howard in our life at some point, right? That's someone that's that's holding up, whether they mean to or not, the mirror to us and helping us see the flaws in ourselves so we can become a better person. Do you think that's kind of ultimately the role that Howard fulfills in his capacity as a friend for Damian, at least to a degree?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like Damian doesn't get anywhere without Howard. And so part of this book was, it's kind of like there's little bits about how Batman realizes that not having Robin around, like he's maybe not as good as he thinks he is. And so that's kind of like a parallel to Damian realizing like, hey, like as good as I think I am, when I have this friend here, I'm way better. And and I think it takes a certain amount of I don't know, like you have to kind of be willing to be vulnerable in a way to like admit that, I guess. Sure. And not that Damian ever necessarily admits that, but we kind of like, you kind of see him understand that. And so, yeah.
And vulnerability in that regard is hard for anybody, let alone a kid.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it just goes back to the sort of fundamental truths that are at the core of Batman and Robin and Howard. And I mean, why I think somebody like myself or Mike, for whom this book is not aimed from a marketing standpoint or whatever, can read it and it still resonates, right? Not just because we're big nerds and love Batman and Robin, but I mean, there's some core universal truths there. So, I mean, from that angle, from that perspective, you say you're a Marvel guy at heart. So if you could just pick anybody from the Marvel universe to give the Batman and Robin and Howard treatment, so to speak, and just tell a story, you get to pick them. Who's it going to be, man?
I mean, like, I would probably do the X-Men because that was always my favorite comic. It was the first comic I spent my own money on. I still know, like, it was X-Men 192. I had a dollar.
Yeah.
And it's I got it at the grocery store. There was issue 193, which was like the double-sized $1.25 issue was out.
It's the Warpath issue.
And I was like, but I bought 192, even though, like, paging through it, it doesn't, like, the action didn't seem as exciting. Wolverine's in like 2 panels at the very end. But I was like, but if I get this one, then I also got like an issue of Spider-Man or something. And yeah, so it'd probably be the X-Men, I think. And I think for me, like all the usual things that people talk about with X-Men, about, feeling like an awkward adolescent teenager and all that.
Like, there's a reason why the X-Men resonate, and it's not just because they're so cool and marketable, and there's like 24 of their books on the shelves every month. So yeah, I could get behind that.
Right.
So then, I mean, outside of Wolverine, who was your favorite X-Men?
I mean, Colossus and Nightcrawler.
Left field choice. Our friend Bethany, they would love you for the Nightcrawler choice.
Yeah, I love drawing Nightcrawlers, like, the sulfur explosion, or
absolutely,
like for teleporting. And then Colossus, I love drawing like the metallic muscles and yeah.
Oh, dude,
amazing.
Like
amazing.
Dave Cockrum just designed some characters for the ages with giant size. I mean, it's astounding how strong those designs are, that decades later we're still coming back to them and variations of them. And anything that's not them doesn't feel right. Like, I don't know if you were still reading comics in the late 90s, but for whatever freaking reason, Nightcrawler briefly had a soul patch and a cod piece on his costume. It was not okay.
I think I missed that.
Yeah, great story, but weird choice in designing art. But yeah, Jeffrey, we're coming up on our hour. I definitely want to give Mike a chance to jump in and ask one last question before we say au revoir.
Yeah, no, Jeff, we talked about the themes and the fresh take of these characters that we've read, been reading for years. What should people take, or what would you like people to take away once they read Batman, Robin, and Howard?
I mean, I guess the biggest thing is just about learning to be okay if you're not the best. Like, mm-hmm. And so, awesome. In this book, the first thing that happens is Damian is told in no uncertain terms, like, you're not Batman. Right. And so the book is all about kind of him learning, like, it's okay if I'm not Batman. I just need to like be the best me.
Sure.
And so hopefully that's the first thing that comes across is like, it's like, you don't have to be the best. You just have to, be your best.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the great things that I took away from the book was there's literally, I think the reader's going to know a Damian, they're going to know a Howard, they're going to know the goofy dad, they're going to know, the crazy uncle that Alfred was or is and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, that's a great way to say it. Cause I mean, this book is really good. It's really fresh take. And it just, the flow it's amazing. It's a really amazing book. It truly is.
Thank you.
Yeah,
most definitely. So, Jeffrey, I don't know if you can talk about your next projects yet, but I mean, if you're able to even drop hints as to what's next for you, man, we'd love to hear.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's always lots going on, and I'm like, sometimes I'm hesitant to talk too much because like they're so, they seem so far off, and it's just like everyone's going to forget by the time you come out. But I think there might be some more Batman and Robin and Howard.
Oh, I love it!
Like
I love it.
When I originally intended it to just be like, I was just like, I'm going to do these characters, this one book, just like, and then I've checked that off of like my childhood dreams, drawing a Batman story done. But yeah, especially now that the book's out and yeah, I'm really happy with like how the book turned out. And it was like, I feel like the characters might have more adventures that they need to have. So
well, that's good, man. I'm glad you feel good about it because you should. It's a fun book.
Super fun.
And I mean, it's one of those cases where just because something says all ages does not mean it's necessarily kid stuff. So Batman and Robin and Howard is on sale today from Penguin Random House. You can check it out anywhere books are sold. You can order it online. I'm sure there's some awesome online platforms that would be more than happy to take your money to read it as well. I want to give a special shout out to Ray Danielo with BH Impact. I'm so sorry, Ray, if I just butchered your name. But they are the ones that reached out to us and really got this ball rolling for this episode. So Ray, thank you so much for your tenacity and for helping us get connected with Jeffrey. Jeffrey Brown, thank you so much for your time this evening. Oh, absolutely. Happy to do it. And we're happy to have you again some point in the future if you ever want to drop by again, my friend. Thank you all for listening. So listen, it's sometimes it's a dark and it's a cold world, but there's always some things that you can do to make it a little bit of a better place. You can read something good, you can support your local comic shop, and above all, you can be good to each other. My name's Matt. This is Mike. This is the Comic Watchers Show. Thank you so much, and we will see you next week, same time, same place, for writer of That Texas Blood, Chris Condon, will be joining us. Until next time, we'll see ya.